Across the landscape of networking, we've looked at basic networking and some of the capabilities from a load balancer perspective. In a previous module, we looked at the specific load balancer. We want to spend a few minutes now taking a look at a layer 7 or high level application load balancer that's available through Azure called an application gateway. My name is Bob Tickelman. I'm excited to be your guide for this module. When we take a look at an application gateway, we want to understand the features and functions that it's going to provide and where does it fit in your solution, and more specifically, how you might be able to configure it. Some of these might fall into conversations more of an architect's perspective, but as the person that's responsible for implementing it, it's a good idea to have that background so you know what features to enable and when to configure them. In a previous module, we talked about a traditional load balancer, and I don't want to get into networking per se, but we talked about an OSI model, which is the model that talks about the 7 layers, and I'm only going to put a couple of them in here, of the OSI model that we're working with. And we saw that that traditional load balancer at what's called the transport layer, that traditional load balancer works at. There's lots of benefits of having it that down, but what it doesn't understand is anything about the application. Because of the way the packets are formed, it's actually going to be highly efficient at being able to transmit and block and work and route traffic because it's down in the protocol layers. It also has the ability potentially of opening up and look at the type of traffic that's in it, especially when you're dealing with firewalls. So when we talk about layer 4, there's pros and cons of having these services apply at both. So in that previous module, layer 4 as a load balancer, very efficient. But what you're going to see with the application gateway, it is a layer 7 load balancer for us, and it provides a thing called a WAF, or a web application firewall. A traditional load balancer wouldn't have any of the firewall capabilities. It is just basically looking at packets. It's not going to be able to inspect them and make some determinations around that. So the application gateway is a regionally based load balancer capability that has a WAF, or web application firewall, built into it. And so you're seeing the underlying infrastructure. Now, these are typically put at the front end of some interaction between a publicly facing service and maybe the Azure's front end resources that you're working with. We saw that in the load balancer model, we had a public facing and an internal. Basically the same thing, just how do we get into the load balancer? And the same thing is going to basically happen here as well. A regionally based service, it doesn't have to be publicly facing, can be, or it can be privately available, maybe behind a traffic manager or an Azure front door service on a global basis. It could be for a private application. It doesn't have to be public facing. And so what you're seeing is this conglomerate of services that are going to take some input. It's going to do these two services of application firewall capabilities and then provide some routing. And because it's at the application layer, high up in the OSI protocol, it's going to actually be able to look at the type of application and the traffic that it's working with. So it can actually do some routing other than what we saw from the 5-tuple hash services that we had from the traditional load balancer. And so you're going to see that we have some rules that we're going to be able to build and put in place to actually route traffic to specific services in the back-end pool that you're going to be working with. So the application gateway as a tool is a great tool to have in your tool belt because it's at a different layer, provides a different set of services, while at the end of the day, functionally, it's providing load balancing and firewall services in a single component. So we talked about that application gateway routing features. And so here are all these pieces being broken up. So what you're missing here from the previous slide, where you saw that the internal components that we're working with it, that front end IP that you have to configure it, whether it's public or private, we talked about. And then you have the back end pools that you're going to be working with. We're now going to take a look at the gateway routing features that you have, and they fall under the categories of what's called a path-based routing or a multiple site routing. When you have a header that comes into the front end of the application, and I said the header because it's actually looking at the packet itself, you're going to have the two features of the firewall capability, so it can do some inspections. The other features that we talk about is SSL offloading. This is going to provide, say, maybe an HTTPS communication in, and we should be able to now take that and take the offloading of the encryption and actually put out HTTP at the back end. So with that firewall, you might be able to do some of these capabilities or not, but that's one of the features you're going to get with this capabilities to do what's called SSL offloading. So we have the application gateway that is now going to be able to take information, and based on the header, so if I come into, say, contoso.com/images, the application firewall is going to be able to now take a look at, oh, that's a path-based routing. I'm going to set it to a very specific set of back-end services that you're working with. So you can have multiple back-end pools. Now, in the demo that I'm going to be doing later for you, we're going to have a group of services in the back end. So in our back end, for the demo, I'm just going to mark this as a demo back end, we are going to have a set of services in the back end, of which we have one routing path that will bring you to all three of them. We have another routing path that will break you up with two, so we have a different routing path that will get you to this. And we have a different one for 3. So it could be a common set of services that then, depending on how you work with it, lots of different ways to build this based around how you need it configured. So if you're deploying this, and that's your responsibility, make sure that you're leveraging the capabilities of it in its entirety, as opposed to thinking, I need 3 different application gateways to provide that capability, where you might be able to, through some creative back-end pool configurations, being able to have a common back-end pool provide a multiplex of routing capabilities that you're working with. And so what we now have is, as I said, the path-based routing based around some back-end from the IP address. Now, when you see a multi-site routing, this could actually have multiple entry points. So I've got a group of people. Maybe I have both a retail division of my organization, and I have maybe a wholesale division, or maybe some private customers. And maybe they have 2 different company names that we want to have them go back to. Maybe they come to a common front end for some services. Maybe they go back to specific services for that URL name that they're working with. So these become variations that we have for being able to route traffic in the application gateway. And remember, at the end of the day, once it finds the application firewall to figure out where to send it, it then is going to provide the load balancing of that, but at the layer 7, higher up in the OSI model from the application layer itself. So we haven't talked too much. We've done more of the WAF features, but the load balancer, once it figures it out, we have that traditional load balancer to be able to balance the load in the back-end pool. So in this module, we've covered one of the regionally based load balancer options that are available to you. We've covered in a previous module a traditional Azure load balancer, and in this one we've looked at the layer 7 application gateway services to provide regionally based load balancing and firewall capabilities to do things like SSL offloading, doing the path-based routing or site-based routing that you have to manage the application flow through the application gateway. So hopefully you add this to your tool belt, because I remember when my dad was told me is, the right tool for the right job, because if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail, and that's what we've typically done with load balancers in the past. These tools of application gateways and the other ones that we didn't cover of the front door and the traffic manager provides a global routing set of tools in addition to that traditional load balancer. So welcome that tool to your tool belt, and I hope that it informed you and will give you capabilities that you didn't know about before. Thanks for joining us for this session. To continue your learning, watch other videos in the course or explore more on Microsoft Learn at aka.ms/learn.